Hello and welcome to Dinis Guarda YouTube podcast series powered by openbusinesscouncil.org and citiesabc.com. Again, we are here continue featuring and highlighting personalities that are shaping the world and fostering ideas and as well people, countries, and as well how we can actually look at the best ways to understand how our visions in a humanity full of challenges with technology, business challenges, climate change, and a lot of different things. So today I'm particularly excited to welcome to our series someone that I actually wanted to do for a long time, this interview, but someone that reflects a lot of different things of the world. So it's someone that comes from Africa, Nigeria, but as well comes from US education. And there's been, as someone that I know for a while, as I would say, a fierce sense of ethics, work, and as well a visionary in a lot of ways. So I'm looking forward for this interview with Prince Adewole Adebayo, which is a personality that, as you'll see in this interview, and I'm sure you'll find more things about him online, is changing a lot of ways, the way we see Africa, the way we see Nigeria, but hopefully as well as an inspiring voice that I believe can actually change a lot of the views of young people around the world. So I would like to welcome to our series, Adewole. It's a great honor to have you here.
Thank you, Dinis. Thank you very much for your kind introduction.
So, Adewole, I know you for some time, and of course, I've been talking more. And one of the things that makes me feel very inspired with the talks that I have with you is your capacity to think, your capacity to look at visions, and special to inspire. So I would like to go as someone that is from, of course, one of the fastest growing economies in the world, Nigeria, and there's also one that came from a very traditional part of Nigeria, but as well someone that was educated around the world. How did it come, your way of looking at the world, that passion that you have for ideas, for change, and as well a bit of your education, if you want to talk about your history, because I think, especially for people listening to us, this is a channel about business and technology. There's a lot of myths. There's myths about Africa, there's myths about people. And when you meet someone, you have to listen to the person to understand the story, to understand what goes on. So I would like to know a bit of your story before we go through all the other questions.
Thank you very much. I was born 8th January 1972 in Ondo, to the royal family in Ondo Kingdom. And I was educated first in our own community. Your first education is at home. And there has been many years or many centuries of systemic or systematized education in Africa that people don't understand. Even before you go to a formal school, if you come from a family of drummers, you would see that a kid who is preschool would already have learned how to beat the drum or play the drums. If you're born in the family of any other profession or tradition, you learn that already before you go for Western education. So the kids in Africa, at least in my time, were not just tabula rasa. They were not empty at the time they're starting formal education. So it's, in Ondo, for example, it's not surprising to find very little kids who are before school age. If they come from a family of dramatic arts or performing arts, that they will already be carrying the masquerade, dancing around, doing whatever the family does before they go to school. So I come from a royal background. So the training starts very early in your life. So I could say that right from childhood, I was trained for leadership because that is the tradition in the family for over 1,000 years, being one rulership. And so you are prepared for that. And then I went to a community-built school St. Stephen's. And there's something particular about that school. That school was built before Nigeria was established. So the school is older than the country. As at the time the school was built in 1876, Nigeria had not come into existence because the British came to Nigeria in 1900. And Nigeria became a country in 1914. But the school had been built far back as 1876. And that was, so the community, the kingdom, the Ondo Kingdom built the school in collaboration with missionaries whom they had to seek out as far away as Sierra Leone, Freetown, to bring the missionaries to the community purposely to build a Western themed educational center. And I later went to St. Joseph's College, which is a Catholic school. And the Catholic history in Nigeria, the first to bring the Catholic Church to Nigeria were the Portuguese. So they brought the Catholic Church to Nigeria centuries before the British came. And later, when the Catholic mission in Nigeria went to public education, one of the schools established was St. Joseph's College in Ondo. And you will see that they have a big tradition, a long tradition. And later, some of the Irish fathers came to the school, and we were at that school. And then from there, I went to the University of Ife, now Adewole University, to study law. And after that, I practiced law for some time. Then I went to the US to become a lawyer. I became qualified as a lawyer in New York. I became qualified as a lawyer in California. And then I did my training in arbitration. I started in Nigeria. Then I became a member in the UK. And then it was in Singapore that I ended up as a fellow of the Institute. So I've been practicing law since that time. And I majored in international investment law. And I've served in various sectors of investment, oil and gas, telecom, ICT, automobile, different fields. And I've done a lot of case management and litigation, almost in every continent, apart from Antarctica, I would say. So I've gone as far as Australia, practiced there. I've done all of that, and I'm still involved in that. So that's a background, basically, before I now talk into my involvement in politics and all of that. But basically, the background, you will see in an African setting, it's full of traditions. And when you look at a typical community around where I come from, you see many of the things that we do. It's a very complex world because you will see different traditions. The rulership is based, the kingship in our place is based on a system of traditional beliefs. At the same time, the part of it has some Christian content to it because of the later part of our history. And part of it has the infusion of different traditions and experiences of other people whom we have interacted with over time. And you reflect, that is reflected in the training of every person that you see there. And so it's not basically what you learn in school that forms your character. It's some of these other experiences, many of which have been derived from many centuries of interactions with different belief systems.
That's a fantastic background, and it touches everything in the world, because of course Africa is the heartbeat of the planet in a lot of ways, because of its young population, because of history. And your family, like you said, is a family with 1,000 years. So, and you mentioned traditions, and so you are in a very I would say unique spot, because in one end you have a tradition of your family background that dates from 1,000 years. In one end you have the education of the US, and of course you are a global citizen working in high-profile organizations both in the US, in Europe, and all over the world. So I want to touch a bit about the traditions. I know that Nigeria is quite unique on these traditions, and I know that for the world people don't understand these traditions, how important it is, the families, the tribes. And as well, when you look at a family that is an aristocratic family like yours, of course, in Europe, we have still some kings, we have still some aristocratic, very powerful families, and as well prestige. But when you look at Africa, people don't look at the same impact. But although there's probably more impact if you look at history, and as well everything that happens and the weight that comes with that. And I know in your case, you have that weight that push you to become a leader, but at the same time, it's your vision to push things forward. And you've been actually always a person that is involved in a lot of work for community, works to serve the society, and as well keeping a business. So I would like to touch this tradition part and how this made who you are. And this, we're going to talk about your family, about some of the traditions in Nigeria that I think are very important for people listening to us.
The one thing we need to understand is that Nigeria is like, should I say United States or United Kingdom, or Soviet Union, the way it was in those days, for those who remember. Essentially what I'm trying to say is that Nigeria is an artificial construct. So if you go back 100 years ago, Nigeria had just started. So, and if you look at it as an independent country, Nigeria did not start to think for herself until 1960, October 1st. And we have been existing around in different communities for thousands of years. And so you would see that the amount of time that the Nigerian government has ruled my community is about 5% of the time that the community has existed. So in our family, the current form of kinship that we have has been there for the youngest version of it, the youngest of the ruling house, has been there for about 600 years. And prior to that, we had over 1,000 years of rulership. So the way we are named, the way we dress, the way we talk, the way we plan the city, the way we organize ourselves as a society is not informed by Nigeria's modern constitution. It's only modified by it. So in my community, for example, you could get elected as the mayor of the city, which we call local government chairman, but it doesn't confer any leadership on you because the leadership is in the king and his advisory council, the high chiefs, and other chiefs. So at any point in time, there are more traditional officials in Ondo Kingdom than all the elected officials in Nigeria combined. And ours is, we are one state out of the 36 states in Nigeria. In that state, there are various kingdoms. Ours is just a kingdom, maybe the most prominent kingdom in the state. As you know, the state is named Ondo State. But there are other kingdoms there with their own tradition. So it shows to you that when you see a Nigerian, you are seeing more than a Nigerian. But because the layer that you know is the epidermis that you know, the upper layer of the skin that you see is all you see. But beneath that surface is a product of different traditions. And some of the kinships are also linked together because some kingdoms over time give rise to other kingdoms. So, for example, someone who is in London might not know the relationship between the royal family in England, the royal family in Holland, and the former royal family in Germany, Normandy, and in Russia. But if you do just a little study, you will know that they are kind of from the same source. And that's how it is in Nigeria. So the royal family in Ondo is related to the royal family in Benin and the royal family in Oyo, but all came from the royal family in Ife. And been there for thousands of years. So these families are like distant cousins, essentially, as time goes on. So the tradition, especially the Yoruba part of Nigeria, is quite linked together. Almost the shell of the structure of our belief system is almost the same. You have the king from different ruling houses, one family, because if the founder or the originator of the kingdom has 5 children, chances are that you're going to have 5 ruling houses, because we don't do what the British call primogeniture in our kingdom. That is to say, if you are a king, your son does not become the king. No. Once your ruling house has finished your term, that is when the king dies, it doesn't go to the son. It goes to another ruling house. So it's kind of rotational like that, so that no line perishes. Because for example, in the UK, if you'll excuse me using that example, you will see that it goes from Elizabeth to Charles, Charles to William, and Harry's line disappears. In Nigeria, it doesn't work that way. When it goes first, and Charles dies, it doesn't go to William, it goes to Charles' brother or somebody. So Prince Andrews will not be totally without an opportunity. If he's still alive, we will take it. Or if he's gone or late, then somehow we will rotate back to his own side. So it goes around everybody. And when it comes to the next generation, it's not only William that's going to be there. You also go to Harry's side. So you don't have any disgruntled part of the royal family. It goes around everyone. Of course, the downside is that because it's a lifetime office, it could take 100 years, 200 years before it comes back to your side. But you are all princes and you're waiting. But the practical implication of that is that the training is on the basis that it could be your turn tomorrow. So you're already trained for leadership. So right from childhood, you are told who you are. So the manner you conduct yourself in private and in public, the manner in which you walk, the manner in which you eat, how you discipline yourself, how well you do when you are at school, and things like that. You want to be an exemplary person. Also, you are trained to serve already. So you train to put yourself last, put others first, to speak last, speak only when you are asked to speak, and speak only what makes sense. Spend more of your time thinking, restraining and controlling yourself. So you are potentially, and as time goes on, if you happen to be close to the elderly ones who are exercising responsibility, you assist them in the process. So you learn the tradition, and there's a lot of history being told, because as a royal family, you have to account for everyone. So you would know what your other young people might not know. Like if you ask a typical person, who is your ancestor to the 10th degree, who was your great, most people won't care anymore, but you are bound to care. So you will know your family up to the last 1,500, or more years. So those are the things that I see. And then we tend to have many children. We tend to have large families because the aim is for the ruling house not to die off. So we tend to make sure that you are encouraged to have families. So it's very rare to have a member of the royal family having just one child or two. No, we tend to have more. But there's something more particular about Ondo in that both male and female have equal rights. So it is traditionally so. So male and female have equal rights. And in fact, the founder of our ruling house was a queen, was a lady. So as a result, because of that, in our tradition, if there's any institution that is organized around women and another institution that's organized around men, the institution organized around women will be seen as superior to the institution organized around men. And if you look at the traditional division of powers, they would give the bigger responsibility, the more sensitive, the constitutionally sensitive position will be given to women. In the belief that they are maternal and they will try to not break the system. They have more at stake in keeping the system alive. So essentially, it's a very long history. But if you have specific questions on any aspect of it, I can give it to you. But essentially, you start school on time. By the time you are 2 years old, you're already in traditional school. You're already learning the culture. You're already learning before you start the formal education. And we are trained in different traditions. And some families in my community have both Muslim and Christians on top of the traditional substratum on which the society is built. So you could have someone who is trained almost with equal facility in Islamic tradition, in Christian tradition, and in traditional tradition. So, like I could recall from my experience, I was attending a Catholic school, and I was an altar boy, as we called, those who carry the staff for the Catholic priests. But for my grandmother, whom I lived with, was an Anglican. So I was also in the boys' brigade in the Anglican church. And because her mother, my great-grandmother, came from a Muslim background, so I would go and recite the Quran together with the other grandchildren. So in one day, I woke up in the morning going to the palace because the palace hours start like 4 a.m. So that's why it wasn't surprising to me that I could start the interview at this time. It doesn't matter because the palace is the first to wake up with the community because anything can happen and you are required. And the palace is the last place to shut down if it ever shuts down at all. So in the traditional sense, on many days, there are rites that the king is supposed to perform very early in the morning relating to one deity or authority or the other. So you will see on a typical day, you could have me going with my great-grandmother to the palace around 4:30 in the morning before school, and then listen to all the things that they had to do with the king and the palace, and then start school in the morning around 7:30, 8 o'clock then return from school and go to choir practice in the Anglican church or Catholic church, and then come back home around 4:35. Then you start the Islamic prayers. You continue, start reciting the book. So it gives you a complete, a panoramic view of the world. You're also still a child, so you're curious in science fiction and stuff like that. You follow. And then we will still go to the cinema in the evening to watch Bruce Lee, his Kung Fu. So we were able to expose to Asian martial arts practices and the Confucius belief behind it. So it's a rounded education right from the time. And when I went to Ife to study, I was very curious. We have a very big library. I believe one of these days when you're back to Nigeria, you should go to Ezekiel Oluwasomi Library. Because to study law in Nigeria, first, Nigeria secondary education at the time, for you to complete your secondary school or high school, you have to know all the rivers in the world. So not the rivers in Nigeria. So a Nigerian kid who's never left Nigeria who could encounter an examination question where all you have to write is the origin, direction, tributaries, and communities around rivers in Europe. So, and you've never been there. You have to study it. You have to talk about rivers in India, Ganges River. So if you look at Nigeria today, you see people who have grown up, know how many miles is the Mississippi River, the Colorado River, all the mountains in the world. So there's a global geography that is taught at secondary level. So, and for many schools, geography was part of, it was compulsory, because if you didn't take it as geography, you would take it in what is called general studies. So it doesn't matter whether you wanted to be a scientist or not, but you cannot say that I do not know anything about the Seine River in Europe, or I don't know anything about the Himalayas, or I don't know anything about the Swiss Alps. You want to know it. So it prepares you for general global knowledge. Of course, there have been people who criticize it, that the educational system should have been more narrowly focused on getting Africans to understand their immediate environment more. So you have a kid from Ondo who knows everything about the rest of the world. But the idea became justified over time when we went to globalization. So you will find that Nigerians are at home, wherever they are. And when I got to Ife, at the university, you will see the University of Ife Law Report or Law Review, but you will see Harvard Law Review, Yale Law Review, Queensland University Law Review. So Law Review from all over the English-speaking world. So you have Indian Law Report series. So you are, from the beginning, encouraged to have access to many of these sources of global knowledge, especially different legal system, different medical system, and the rest of it. So by the time I remember by the time I was writing the California bar, I saw some of the questions. I could recall back to my undergraduate days at IFE, what were really the restatements of the law and all the rest of it. So I have a feeling that the educational system in Nigeria is preparing you for the world. So whether you are going to stay at home for the world to meet you, or you are going to go out and meet the world. But if you do an experiment, the typical Nigerian person, adult, is already prepared for the world. There's hardly any place you can say, oh, I'm from Kazakhstan. He has something to tell you about Kazakhstan. He already has some surface level familiarity that, oh, there are people from Tajikistan, there are people from Turkmenistan, there are many people from, there is nowhere he's going to say, where is that? You know, that's contrary to what I discovered when I moved to America. I discovered that you could just pick most parts of the globe that you think are quite prominent, and you find highly educated, highly intelligent, highly articulate Americans saying, where's that? You know, not that they are not intelligent or lazy, it's just that they haven't come across it all. There's nothing that has prepared them for that level of familiarity with the rest of the world.
No, that's impressive, and it shows as well your erudition and as well your passion for knowledge. So one of the things that actually you just touched that is that, for instance, in a recent study, Nigeria appeared that, for instance, the American Nigerian is actually the most educated, I would say, culture and race in the US. So that shows as well the disparities of perception that we have when it comes to a country like Nigeria. And of course, someone like you that had a fantastic education, it is as well very focused on education. So I want to touch, before I go to your career. So when I talk about Nigeria, there's a lot of course, history, a lot of confusion, and a lot of myths, I would say. So in one end, Nigeria has around 25 ethnical groups, but around 10 contribute to most of the population. And then, for us, if you look at the language, there's around 525 regional languages in Nigeria. In terms of course, of population, Nigeria, as we speak, is the most populated country in Africa, and is becoming by 2050. These are some numbers. If I see in my notes, is going to be probably the fourth country in the world in terms of population, and this is so it's projected to hit 444 million by 2050, surpassing the US and becoming the fourth largest in the world. So. And of course, if you look at the economy, is right now one of the fast growing economies in the world, and it has all these complexities. So someone that grew up on the history of the country, on a family that has over 1,000 years of history, and then study in the US, and as well as a successful business personality, both as a lawyer, established in the US, but established as well in Europe and Nigeria. So I would like to see, from your education, from what you mentioned to Nigeria, then to the US, how do you kept your culture and thrive? Because of course, one of the things that people talk about Nigeria is the sense of drive, that I would say probably is one of the most driven people that I met in the world, from all the cultures that I met. And I'm not saying this with any kind of hyperbolic way, but it's actually my impression and a lot of the things I study. But that drive is part of the culture, part of this narrative around what means Nigeria. Like you said, is a country that is a sum of a lot of different cultures. But I would like to see this on your culture, for instance, especially from Nigeria to the US, which of course is still the leading economy in the world. How do you saw that as well? And of course, Nigeria changed a lot in the last decades.
Okay, what we need to understand is that Nigeria has a very rich diversity. So for each of those, there is no ethnic group in Nigeria that speaks two languages. So when you have 400 or so ethnic groups or languages, it shows to you there are 400 and something ethnicities. And these ethnicities are not just tribes in the sense of, in the anthropological way, they are ethnic nationalities, they are nations. They were nations on their own before they became Nigeria. So they're not, it's just like European Union. Before European Union came, the Portuguese have been Portuguese, the Spanish are Spanish, the French, even within the French, the France is an amalgam of older ethnicities, Normandy, other places, Tuscany, other places. So the same thing in Germany. Germany is not just one. The Germanic people have different nations, Prussia, different parts like that. So in the United Kingdom, they have the Scottish, the Welsh, the English, and the Irish. So that's how it is in Nigeria. These are different nationalities who were independent and who have been independent for a long time. But when colonial rule came, they were all put together. So what you get out of that is that when you experience the Igbo part of Nigeria, the tradition is rich, it's independent, is autochthonous to them. When you go to the Hausa speaking part of Nigeria, they are unique, they are self-sufficient in their cultural experience, and they can function clearly as an independent country. And even within the Hausa, we have different kingdoms. So it's not just Hausa kingdom. You have Kano, Rano, Sokoto, Zozo, Zaria, and so many other Hausa communities like that. Then you go to the Ijos in the south of Nigeria, they're independent, and they have many Ijo kingdoms. Arubo, Apoya, different types. Then you have the Calabaris and all of that. Then when you go to the northeast, you have the Kanuris, whose kingdom goes, so the head of the Kanuri is not limited to Nigeria. He also has part of his kingdom in Chad, and a bit of it in the lower corner of, in the upper northwest of Cameroon. So even though constitutionally he's bound to be in Nigeria, as a Nigerian citizen, but his kingdom extends outside Nigeria. So, and up to now, he still has to exercise responsibility. And that is true of, say, our original kingdom in Oyo. The king of Oyo, the Alaafin of Oyo, even though he's based in Nigeria and he's a Nigerian, but he has traditional responsibility up to Benin Republic, Togo, and some part of Ghana. Actually, if you know about Ghana, Accra in Ghana is a traditional home of the Ga people, who are kind of Yoruba kind of people who came from Ife as well and were part of the Oyo Kingdom. So in discussing ethnicity in Africa, scholars or commentators use loose terms like tribe. So if you were to call the entire French the French tribe, it won't make sense to the French. Or you call, you are in Brussels, and because you are in the United Nations headquarters, you say, oh, the Portuguese tribe. The Portuguese look at you like, what do you mean by Portuguese tribe? Portugal is a whole country. It's kings over the years. So why? So because we are now in the European Union, you think you can just call out tribes. So that's how it is in Nigeria. So these traditions have always been there. And the thing to note is that the amalgamation treaties signed with the British preserve these traditional institutions, and they still have authority. And in different parts of the country, as you go around, you will see that many people still conduct their affairs as if the British never came and their kingdom was never touched. So they still work with that. And I'll give you an example of that. Former president of Nigeria, Shehu Shagari, who was our president between 1979 and 1983. Prior to that, he had been our Minister of Finance, our Minister of Works, and the rest of it. When he retired as the president of Nigeria from politics, he went back to Sokoto, where he came from, and became a chief in Sokoto, and was taking up his duty, traditional duty, almost every day, going to the palace to perform his functions. And he would sit on the floor, obeisance and respect for the Sultan of Sokoto, even though he had been president of Nigeria. But he spent more years as a Sokoto chief than the 4 years he spent as Nigeria's president. So, and the same thing you will say about Obasanjo, who was president for many years, who is quite well known. In Abeokuta, where he comes from, as an Egba person, or an Owu person, he has his own traditional duty there, which he performs. And it doesn't matter that he's president. When he's in that community, they just know him by the title that he bears in the traditional system, and he takes his ranking according to his ranking. So he might be number 6 in the kingdom, but he's number 1 in the country. But that's for the country. But when he's in that community, he cannot speak before number 1 person speaks, 2nd person speaks, or anything. So the system is alive. And so many of us who are princes take that responsibility more seriously. So you want to be president of Nigeria, you know the maximum you can do 2 terms or 4 years each. So 8 years you can be president. But for your entire life, from the day you are born to the day you die, you are a prince of the kingdom if you don't become the king. So that's an office that you carry around with you wherever you go. So it cannot be said, for example, that you are a prince of Ondo or Oyo or Sokoto or Kano or Onitsha, and you went to prison in Portugal. The whole kingdom is in disarray. So that, or you didn't do well in an exam, or you cheated in an exam in some university in Australia, the kingdom is affected. So that sense of traditional identity is there. Now, because we are such a large population, we are about 220 million now, even though we are projected to grow rapidly to the figures that we project for 2050. But as we speak now, we are 220 going towards 230. And our land is smaller than Niger. Our land is smaller than South Africa or Ethiopia. So what does that suggest, or Tanzania, for example? So what does that suggest to you? What it suggests to you is that we are very competitive. And you have to do well. So the competition starts from home. You want to do, because we come from large families, so it's not unusual to have a family with 9 children. So you want to do well. You don't, a family with 9 children are not going to be pampering 9 children. So it's not like Europe where you have only 1 kid or 2. You could pay attention to the 2. In Nigeria, it's a very large family. So you get your acts together with minimal supervision. So you grow up quickly. And the country has been having challenges with all kinds of infrastructure support. So you need to get your your acts together and be quick. Otherwise, the impression will be given, unfortunately, that further investment in you is a waste of time. Because if a parent has, if a father has 8 children and is thinking of how to ration his resources to educate them, and your sibling has straight A's, and you are struggling with D's and all of that, it's going to conclude that it makes more sense to invest these limited resources in the kid that is having straight A's, because that's more likely to succeed than one who is struggling to maintain some C's and has some issues. So they would attend to you later, but they would rather attend to the person who is quicker. And the tradition also, at least I noticed that when growing up in school, the teachers tended to pay attention to students who are hardworking and get it right. So that is the essence. I've seen that in some communities, the teachers are encouraged to pay attention to the pupils at the bottom of the class who don't do so well. But prior to my knowing that in Nigeria, our tradition is to pay attention to the top. So the system is designed to cream up the top best, rather than to try to lift those at the bottom to come up to make the best. No, Nigeria just focuses on, if I have 40 kids in a class and 15 are fantastic students, I rather pay my attention to make these 15 to become exceptional than try to struggle with the bottom 10. But some second thoughts are now being given in private schools to, assisting slow learners and all of that. But in my time, my age, the world was very unkind to children with attention deficit disorder, who were slow learners. Both the family, the school, the community was extremely unsympathetic to anyone who was a slow learner. It was seen as a sign of stupidity. And so they just consign you to, okay, maybe you're not good enough. So you probably go and learn some craft or some other things, but nobody was going to waste their time, too much. But I think this new generation, with further study of educational psychology, they're having second thoughts regarding slow learning. So I'm saying all of this to explain to you why Nigerians become very competitive, because you don't want to be weaned off as one of those slow learners. So you want to quicken up and quicken your step. And because of the intensity of the training, when you go out of Nigeria into any other system, it's like when Ethiopians come down from the highlands to come and run, their lungs are more efficient. So they wonder why it's so easy to run, because they've been running on thin air all their lives. And that's how it is with Nigerians intellectually. You are having to learn calculus in some communities with no calculus books. So the mathematics teacher has to memorize most of the theorems and formula in his head and pour it into your head. So if you now come to a system where you have abundance of tools for demonstration, for learning, you just excel, provided that you don't slow down and assume that life is now more comfortable. So in the study of Nigeria, if you want to, you have to go beneath the monolithic expectation that Nigerians have one experience. No. Nigeria have different experiences. And you can see Nigeria better from outside, in the sense that if you were a scholar in Saudi Arabia, you will find some set of Nigerians who are highly knowledgeable in Arabic studies, who speak and write Arabic fluently, and who excel in Middle Eastern knowledge. They're from Nigeria. And then when you go to the Vatican, you will find Nigerian cardinals, Nigerian bishops, who are essential to the running of the Vatican. They're from the same Nigeria. And when you go to pop music, if you go to, for example, Candomblé religion in Brazil, you will see that the entirety of it, or the most substantial origin of it, has come from the Yoruba people of Nigeria. So wherever you find yourself, you will see that Nigerians have different traditions. It's like having a country that has desert, tundra, forest, maritime side. It's like when you are in the US, when you are in Florida, you are in the tropics. When you are in Alaska, you are in the wilderness. When you are in Washington State and Oregon, you are in forested wood area. When you go to Yellowstone, New Mexico, and all of that, you are in the desert. So it's one country, but you have all the experiences. That's how it is in Nigeria in terms of culture. It's a cultural Olympiad you find in Nigeria, that whichever part of the world you come from, there's a portion of Nigeria that is aligned with your worldview and your experience, and they're very good at it, and they're deep, but they're as part of one country. And when we mix together as a country, we also have certain commonalities that if you see a typical Nigerian, you could actually identify. We're always in a hurry to succeed. Sometimes we're too much in a hurry at individual level. We tend to master what we do. If a Nigerian wants to be educated, he doesn't want to be educated as an undergraduate. He wants to go all the way to PhD if he wants to. If he's in business, he doesn't want to work at middle level management. He wants to be the CEO. If he's in sports, he doesn't feel satisfied until he's become a global champion. So if he's in music, he's making music from his tradition, but he wants to make sure that his music is accepted all over the world. So that is that global consciousness combined with internal competitiveness, combined with personal drive to succeed, because every Nigerian is looking for an achievement. So you'll be surprised that you find people who are taxi drivers. They still want to become professors if they had their way. So you will find politicians who didn't go to school that much, who went into politics, but you will find out that at the end of their career, they are jealous of the professor. So they want to come back to the university or get a honorary degree or something. Nigeria is always looking for something to stand out. It's not a community where majority want to live their life quietly. I found out in my experiences in different parts of the world, the majority of people with the rest of the world just want to be left alone. Live a nice life, stay in their home, in whatever remote part of the country it is. But it's not like that in Nigeria. Every Nigerian, average Nigerian, wants to be known, wants to be celebrated, wants to be recognized for one achievement or the other. So I think that might account for some of the things that you see. And also, I should not forget this part, that in Nigeria, and some have put a positive spin on it, some have put a not so positive spin on it. But in Nigeria, you are not responsible for yourself alone. So you cannot say, when I grow up, I start to work, then I'm going to marry, then my spouse and I would have our children, and we will take care of the children. If you do all of that, in the rest of the world, you are seen as successful because you have been able to go through your childhood, you completed your education, you got yourself a job, you've set up a family, and you are responsible for yourself, your spouse, and your children. In Nigeria, that is not success at all. Because in Nigeria, you are not supposed to be responsible for yourself, your spouse, and your children. You're supposed to be responsible to the generation before you. So it means that you want to make contributions to the retirement of your parents. If you have grandparents, you want to be responsible for their medical care and support. If you have siblings of yours, they have children, if you do well, you're supposed to make contribution to their own well-being. And if your third cousin is getting married, each of your cousins that gets married, you're supposed to make some contribution to that effort, whether it's something substantial, if you can afford it, at a minimum, something symbolic and supportive. So you're not supposed to live alone with your wife and children. You're supposed to adopt some people, whether they are related to you by family or they belong to your religious tradition, somehow, neighborhood. You have to be responsible for their upkeep and try to accommodate them. So if someone were to come to your beautiful home and they find only you, your husband or your wife and your children and no other person there, they will go away with the impression that you're extremely selfish. With so many people not doing well in society, you can't even take anybody to join you, and you also support them. So that kind of thing is there. So don't be surprised if you find Nigerians working in Europe, in America, in any place, you will see them going to Western Union offices regularly and having to send money to somebody, adopt one child in Africa and stuff like that. So that also makes you to wonder, why do Nigerians do 3 jobs when they are working overseas? It's not just for themselves. So it's not just greed for you to be the richest person. It's also that you want to make impact. For example, I awarded my first scholarship when I was 14 years old. That was when I gave my first scholarship. And that scholarship that I started when I was 14 years old still continues to today. I have over 2,000 students on that scholarship currently. So for some, there are times when it could be like a big burden, but sometimes you feel good about it because last month I produced, I think, the best students in Greenwich University in London who had the first class in accounting. And we've had such successes in medicine, in other medicine, pharmacy, other engineering, law. So you feel good about it, but it just shows to you why you see some Nigerians that are quite driven because of that extended family and that community responsibility. And I don't want you to understand this from the point of view of charity. No, it's a duty. So it's not like when you do these things, the community is going to give you an award and say, oh, this is an exceptionally generous person. No, they will just see you as someone who is responsible and performing his duty. And every other person is expected to be like that. So it's not the Western way of seeing as a philanthropist. No, it's not philanthropy. It's as good as paying your taxes. So nobody gives you an applause for that. So that's how this community support works in African tradition.
That's a fantastic way, and I thank you so much for that. It actually, for me, made me understand much better the cultural nuances, and actually the way the Nigerian society works, and actually the sense of tribe that is very unique, and that Nigerians share, and actually I would say a lot of in Africa, but in a lot of different areas, like you said. So it's a masterclass in cultural understanding of Africa and as well Nigeria in particular. But as well, I think we all need to look at this, especially for me, it's a learning curve, because in my Western way of looking, of course, we don't understand that, and that's a big challenge for the world of business and technology, is that people don't understand these nuances, and that's why we create so much issues in the world economy and as well in technology, especially as we program technology and so forth. So I want to go to your career. So you have a fantastic career that after your studies, you created and you started a very impactful legal career as a litigation lawyer, but as well as a business lawyer at Dinis Abayomi and Coast in Lagos, Nigeria. And after 2 years of legal practice, you found your own law firm, Adewole Adebayo and Company, House of Law, in 2002 in Abuja. And you've been actually dealing with a very high-profile case studies and case trials, both in Nigeria, but as well in the US and here in the UK, where I'm based, and as well all over the world. So tell us a bit about how do you create it and why you choose law, and as well, I know that you are a fantastic lawyer. How do you been building this international law firm that you are leading, both in the US, in Europe, and Africa?
I think that I didn't become a lawyer. I must have been born a lawyer, because while I was in high school, what I wanted to be was maybe a journalist or a historian. So, but I'm naturally a lawyer. And so if I want to do anything that doesn't look like work, that looks like I'm just breathing in and out, easy, natural, is law. First, I come from a family that has so many lawyers. So maybe subconsciously, I didn't realize that, but I've always been the legal milieu. And my grandmother used to have, first, our family was quite litigious. They always something to sue somebody for, because the family, of course, has a lot of traditional assets, lands, thousands and thousands of acres of land. So if you have very large lands like that, somebody is going to trespass on your land, somebody is going to have one issue with you or the other. And so right from when I was living in primary school, going to secondary school, I'd been like the legal secretariat for my grandmother to remind her of all her cases in the courts, to arrange the fees for the lawyers, to whether she served with affidavit or something, I want to keep it and say, this is the counter affidavit for this is that. So I didn't take that to heart. I was just like my grandmother's PA. I was my great-grandmother's adjutant. And when she passed on, I became my grandmother's PA. So I will be the one to go to the lawyer's office, go to the court, and collect the paper and come back. There are my uncles are lawyers. So many of the famous, some of the famous lawyers in Nigeria are my relatives. But so during school break, vacation, I would just go to one of their law firms, sit down there, read through, because I read all the time. So it's probably part of the reason why I have puffy eyes now. I read all the time. I'm always reading. Reading is my comfort. Reading is how I go to sleep. And if I try not to read, I have insomnia. I could be awake all night, except I read something, then I sleep off. So otherwise, I won't sleep. And if I wake up in the morning, the first thing I pick is to read. And then when reading became electronic, that's why you see me have my phone by my side. People assume, oh, what are you doing with your phone? But I'm actually either reading a book, reading an article, or something. I'm always reading. So when I got to my final year in high school, I just thought to myself, okay, what can you actually do that it's easy, no brainer? What was law? So I decided to, so okay, let me be a lawyer. So then I wrote the exam, I passed one time, then went to study law. But when I was at the university, I found law quite boring because of it's a very difficult experience to explain. When I got to the university, I found my first year was very okay. I loved it. But when I started studying law, it was too narrow. I found law, so we could spend the whole semester on legal systems. And it's based on the curriculum that you can find in 5 books. So I believe if I study these 5 standard textbooks, I know everything about legal system. Why am I spending the whole semester just taking it in bits? So I would leave the law faculty and go to pharmacy, where I will learn something in pharmacy. So many of my classmates will not find me. Where are you? They will see me coming out of pharmacy with some pharmaceutical books. Then next time I will go into engineering class. I will go to, I spend my time at the university going from department to department. So I will come back to law, write my exam. So in many of the other departments, they thought I was a student. So if you were in pharmacy students thought I was a student because I would come to pharmacy class and listen, take notes, and do everything. And then next week, I want to go to engineering. So I will go to engineering drawing class and sit down there. If we do the engineering drawing, I will be doing together with them. Because at the university, they used not to take attendance in my time. If you have a class, you just come in, you sit down, and they don't care what department you come from. They don't care whether you register in the school or not. Just come and sit down and listen. So then I will go to the performing arts, dramatic arts and all of that. So sit down with them, sometimes co-write a play with them, and then go and see the play being performed. Then next time I go to agriculture and things like that. So that's how I spend my time in the university. But I was also involved in activism because that was the time Nigeria was under military rule, and we were determined to get rid of the military because we thought it was very bad for Nigeria in 1993 to be under military rule. The whole rest of the world had moved on. Even South Africa was already democratized. So it was something we could not accept. So I spent my time away from school, leading underground movement to get rid of the military, to get rid of military rule. So I spent a lot of time on that. That also occupied my time, but eventually we succeeded. In 1999, the military handed over, and we've never seen them since that time to now. And that's one of the reasons why I tweeted yesterday to condemn the coup in Niger, and to see that we'll do everything possible to get rid of those military guys. We cannot afford to have Africa in this age not used to government by the people. We should be, whatever is wrong with the government, you should resolve it in the next election, or in the parliament, or in the courts. But you cannot have the military coming back to Africa either inspired by foreign support or local support, is not acceptable. So that was a tradition that we did. So then, when military ended, so I qualified as a lawyer. And immediately I had a partner. We started a small law firm, which is people don't talk much about. Then I met a classmate of mine, now Dr. Tola Adu, she's in the UK now. She used to teach at the University of Dundee. At that time, she was in Nigeria. So I met her, and she said, "Oh, how are you?" So I said, "Well, I have my own law firm. What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm into investment advisory solicitor job," because I had written the first article called International Investment Law in Africa, because it was introduced by Professor Popola towards the final year I was in university. So when I was writing my undergraduate thesis, it was written on integrated trends, international law of trade and investment. And I think that was the first peer-reviewed article on international trade law in any African university. So I was determined that international trade law, international trade and investment law, is the future, because countries are not sufficient to make laws to govern trade anymore, because trade used to be within countries. So your domestic commercial law will satisfy you. But most of world trade is cross-border. And so you have to allow bilateral or multilateral arrangements or legal regimes to come into existence. Because when you go online to try to buy a product, it may be produced in China and marketed in London and delivered to you in Lagos. So there must be a lawyer who is able to think through the entire jurisprudence that covers the 3 or 4 jurisdictions implicated. Because if you use a US card, a Visa card or MasterCard, that banking law is governed in the US. And not only in the US, but in the state of New York, or whatever state the headquarters of the bank is. So I started thinking along that line. But when I met her, she said, "Well, we have a lot of court cases, and I know you're very good with litigation. So come on, do that for us." So I went. The interview lasted just a short time. I joined them. So I did litigation. Later, I became head of chambers. The promotion was quite rapid. I became head of chambers. Then one Christmas holiday, my principal called me, because that explains something as to why I established my law firm very early. So he called me and said, "You're doing a lot of work here, and it's exceptional. And I feel uncomfortable having to make you do all this work when you have a lot of talent. I think it would be good for you to set up your own law firm, and we work together, rather than just work here on a pay," because the system of partnership in law firm had not been developed well in Nigeria, at least at that time. So that's how I went to set up my law firm. Then I started servicing clients across borders. So, and one of the occasions, on a regular occasion, I'll go to London, then I'll go to New York, I'll go to other places. Then it occurred to me that, okay, why don't you, because I was also now getting quite well facilitated in the law, familiar with the legal system. So many of the lawyers will say, "Oh, you must be practicing here for you to know this much. So you must be practicing here." I said, "No." Then I said, "Why don't you write the exam? Because you actually know so much about the legal system here." So that's how I wrote the exams. And just one time, I don't know how it is, because I found out quite surprisingly, that the bar exams don't have to kill you like the bar exam in Nigeria will kill you. So, if you're writing the bar exam in Nigeria, you have to put your self through torture, put your feet inside water to keep yourself awake. If you're writing the bar exam in the US, it's so well structured. They want you to pass. Actually, I think I've explained to someone that in Nigerian bar exam, at least in my time, they wanted you to fail, except if you can prove otherwise. In US, those who write the bar exam questions want you to succeed. They want you to pass, except you're not interested. So it was much easier. Then I started practicing and servicing clients all over the world. And because I was also kind of quick with numbers, so it's easier to help the client beyond just law. You discover that it's not only when you have litigation that you call the lawyer or you have a dispute with someone, you realize that, okay, actually, when we want to start a new business, I want to negotiate, this lawyer is very good at it and is familiar with different jurisdictions. So you could take me to India and I'm familiar with the legal system in India from state to state, the business tradition there. So clients discover that that also works for them. And where we have different lawyers in different jurisdictions, I found out that they are very good lawyers. But many have come from a tradition where they know the law of where they are alone. And they are satisfied with that. So then I have to play the role of the person who knows something about every of the systems. So you end up coordinating, if it's a consortium, if it's a collaboration, if it's a joint venture, if it's franchising, whatever you do, I play the role of the lawyer who knows something about every of the systems. And because I can work across time zones and work around, and I have a very understanding family, it allows me to spend a lot of time at airports and inside aircraft and in different parts of the world. I've been privileged. I'm grateful to my family for that. So that has been the reason why I am everywhere. So I discovered when I went to do cases in Korea, I don't read Korean, but it didn't take long for me to become very comfortable with the legal system in Korea. I think there is a common thread in legal philosophy. You try to create proportionality, reasonableness, fairness, efficiency, accuracy, veracity. And so whatever roundabout way you drafted your jurisprudence, all of these elements will be there. That the legal system is designed to predict consequences of behavior to people and to push them towards keeping their word, obeying the law, and also protect yourself fairly, because every legal system has an element that the idea of negligence is balanced by the idea of you trying to mitigate your loss and things like that. So when you read through all of this, just for you to take your time to know what's the current test, because you know the legal philosophy of that jurisdiction, what are the applicable statutes or case law on this particular issue, and to make sure that you get the latest iteration of the legislation and understand that you can easily explain it to the client. And if you are very good at taking very good decisions on behalf of people, they tend to just let you continue to take very good decisions. And if you give candid advice as well, that it's not all their wishes that you let them get away with, you let them know. So you have to keep to the agreement since you've already signed it. Even though it's inconvenient, you have to. And over time, they get used to the fact that you help them in their reputation management as fair people or companies that do fair. So then I got involved in the world of arbitration. So going around the world, because in arbitration, the licensing regime is not required. So I can be a lawyer from India. I come to Portugal to do arbitration. You are allowed to do it because it's private proceedings, but you are still applying the law of the country. So you go to the London Court of Arbitration, Fleet Street. You go to the Paris Chamber of Commerce arbitrations. You go to do arbitration all over the world. So that also allows you, if you are interested, get familiar with the legal system, to study the law, and then you can, and then one client leads to another, and then there's a value chain. So if advising an automobile company, you will find out that they are getting their engine from another company, they are getting their transmission system from another company, they are designing their models from the same company that the other companies use. And then you get involved in personnel issue, in regulatory issue, in property management. So you would see that if you are, that's my experience advising the automobile industry, you discover that if you are really deep in advising one, you almost know all the processes of the others because they kind of intersect. That's the same thing with the oil and gas industry. If you are negotiating for someone to build a refinery, or you're trying to do a gas compression plant, or you discover that, oh, you've met this guy before. Same plant that is in Holland is what they're talking to you about in KAFTAN. So before you know it, you know the community well. And then, of course, you know the banks are all interlinked. So with that, if you get involved in loan arrangements, then from there you get to know most of the hedge funds that are involved in it. You get to know. So you get familiar, and then over time, you become like a whisperer of global commerce. You tend to know what's going on because there's no way you negotiate loans and advances for companies, clients that you will not know about interest rate. So you will know about the interest rate in different countries and how the central banks or reserve bank in these countries determine their interest rate. So you get used to it. So it's about curiosity. So I like to immerse myself in the environment. So when I'm in Portugal, I'm essentially Portuguese at that point. I'm no longer Nigerian. So I'm interested to say a few words in the language, to taste the food, to see how they reason, especially when we negotiate. The culture of the person I'm negotiating with is my priority. Because I need to know, because when the Chinese don't agree with you, they can be quite expressive about it, just by gesture. But if Koreans don't agree with you, or Japanese, for example, they can be extremely silent, whereas you're actually really, really irritating them at that point. So you have to get used to the fact that Japanese are not so expressive, that if they're not talking anymore, then they've had it. And so you learn, and of course, you know the American system, we talk a lot. At the beginning of every negotiation, the American is telling you about his dog, his wife, his house, and school. So we're kind of expressive. And if you don't feel happy, you can easily know. So you study all of this. So it's part of what makes a successful international law practice. There's nothing magical about it.
Oh, that's very impressive, and I know that this knowledge that you're showing is something that is the difference between what you do and as well the way you look at things in a very deep, profound, but as well very impactful, and the relationships. And this is actually very unique, but very special, especially as you're dealing with a lot of different cultures, a lot of different countries, and a lot of different complexities of law, legal systems, and so forth, which is a very, very difficult task, especially when you deal with the processes that are in completely different countries, from the US to Africa to Europe and so forth. So you are as well a bit of a serial entrepreneur. You've been doing a lot of things, and one of the things you did was as well, you founded the King Adebayo Film and Theatre Arts Network Television, KAFTAN TV, in 2016. And besides this as well, I know that you're very involved in a lot of work in terms of charities and education, which is, I know that is a big passion of yours. So can you tell us about that? And I know that you were as well, you've been awarded as well and recognized by the Ondo state government because of the work you did in terms of both this work of community, sense of service, but as well entrepreneurship. I would like for you to tell about that to our audience. I know that it's been a long interview, but if you are still...
No problem at all. You see, first and foremost, you know, a lawyer says two things. Time and talent. Those are the things that the lawyer says to the client. And so that is this relativity, space-time of law practice, your talent and your time. As a result of which, lawyers hardly have time for any other thing. You spend your time trying to service the client because they pay a lot, they pay you per hour, and they pay a lot of money for that. At the same time, it has another implication. Lawyers also don't have time to spend their money. So you would also come across a lot of experiences over time as you are practicing law, because whichever industry you are servicing, you are knowledgeable about that industry very well. You are knowledgeable about entrepreneurship. You know about business, success and failures. So over time, I have tried to look at areas by which communities can rise quickly. In America, where I am, I found out that almost every industry is mature, and the only two fields I see where you can rise very well is property. If you get it right, you can still make a lot of progress with property, and the intellectual property, both physical property and intellectual property. So those are the areas when I'm in the US I focus on, I invest in, I push effort in. In Africa, it's a green field. They haven't got agriculture right. So you will see that, you will see I have a lot of interest in agriculture. Oil palm plantation, animal farming, all sorts of agriculture, because Africa needs to feed herself and those who are on the continent, and also produce enough to earn some foreign exchange. Another area is education. So you will see a lot of my charity work, another work is on education. The third is dealing with communication and the philosophy. And I think the media plays a major role. I don't want a media that dumps down the intelligence of the people. So that's basically why I started the KAFTAN TV. It was meant, if you review all the content and compare to the content that you obtain from TV stations that are just focused on commercial gain, you won't find fake news, not fake news over the years. You won't find content that are not didactic. You won't find content that divisive. or incendiary. So the content, so that's the whole idea, and to teach young people, it was built around getting young people to have their first experiences in media management. And I think in the history of Nigeria, apart from the old government stations, NTA and all the rest of them, KAFTAN TV has produced more people working in different, there's no TV station in Nigeria that you will not find people who will say, when I started from KAFTAN TV. From there, they graduated to work in other TV stations. So we train hundreds. Even though we're less than 10 years, we've trained hundreds of young people in what we call PRAM. There's a training we call PRAM, P-R-A-M-P. You have to learn photography. You have to learn presentation. You have to learn editing. You have to learn management. You have to learn production. So you cannot say, oh, I'm just a newscaster. When you can be picked anytime to go and film, take your camera and go and film a documentary on your own. You cannot say, I don't know about sound engineering. Because when I started KAFTAN TV, some of the challenges I found was there too many specializations in the media. Someone will say, I'm a sound effect guy. And I said, okay, so after the sound effect, what do you do next? No, I don't do anything, just a sound effect guy. The other guy says, I'm just a lighting guy. I set the lights in the studio, and that's all I do. I said, okay, after that, what do you do? Nothing. So we said, no, you have to know everything first. Then you can decide to go and major in lighting. But if there's no lighting job, or we don't have any lighting duty, I should be able to ask you to go and write a script. So it was, you should be able to write a script, a pre-production plan. I should be able to interview somebody. So we tried to train them, and I think after that, everybody got used to that. Even now, we're having a lot of interns who know that that's a very easy place to come and learn all these facets of media. And we've been doing documentaries, we're doing taking news to the communities, and we're also broadcasting in other languages than English. So you will see, you can find the English, find the Hausa, you find the Yoruba. So we try to add more languages to our repertoire to see that we keep these languages alive. We speak them in their authentic form so that they can get preserved. And we are creating history, because everything we do, by the time we conclude this interview, we have created history. Because everything we've done here is part of the collective knowledge of mankind that is in the universal library of humanity. So when you produce that, you want to make sure you produce wholesome content that makes the world a better place, that shines light on dark spots of our experiences as a people. So that's his whole idea of setting up the TV. So I've been involved in setting up stockbroking firms, investment companies, and so many other things. I think the reason why people remember KAFTAN TV is because it's feasible in the media, but all other things, they just take their own course in their private, in the private way, in the privacy of an investment company, unless they have a litigation or issue, you don't know anything about them. But in media house, every day, you must hear something about it, because it's by its very nature, it's public. And it's not the public, it reports on the public.
That's a very impressive, thank you so much for that. And it's an impressive achievement. I think this kind of work is key, and as well, it shows your commitment to the service and to the work, because it's a substantial investment, but as well a substantial, I would say, impact in society that takes a lot of different areas and open a lot of doors. So I want to talk right now, of course, about probably the biggest initiative you did. That is, on January 15, 2022, you announced your intention to run for the prestigious office of Nigerian president. And I know that you started the process. That process was started. There's a lot of ambition on that. So tell us about that, and tell us how you are working in this vision to change Nigeria, and as well why you decided to go on this path.
Okay, Nigeria has everything to succeed, but it lacks the most important thing to succeed. So Nigeria is like a treasure house full of all the tools you need to succeed and all the materials. But it's locked up and they lost the key. And the key is leadership. Nigeria just needs leadership. And if you study our history quite well, we did so well from 1960 up to 65. But due to poor leadership, we went to civil war. We had a coup in 66 and went to civil war from 67 to 1970. And we've been under military rule from 66 to 79. Then we had 4 years only of civilian government. And we were back to military rule from 1984 to 1999. And since we came back to civilian rule 1999, we've been we had a retired general from 1999 to 2007. And just within a short time, we're back to another retired general from 2015 to 2023. So I realized that the country is not being well governed. And you can know immediately. You don't have to be negative to say that. It's just a fact. You see that the people, one, feel it, that they're not being well governed. And everyone is talking about potentials all the time. When you go to a country and people are saying, this country has potential, this country has potential, what they are saying is that the country is actually, in actuality, is not doing its best. Now, Nigerians excel all over the world, and more Nigerians think that they can excel by going outside the country. So I look at the way we manage our resources, and I found out that Nigeria is one country that does not need any infusion of foreign capital. You rarely hear of anyone saying, I'm going to Saudi Arabia to go and invest. Why? Because Saudi Arabia has all the money it needs to invest. You can always say, I'm going to Saudi Arabia to sell the technology or a service. And Nigeria has more gas reserves than the entire GDP of the United States, many times over. So agricultural capacity of Nigeria is enough to put Nigeria in the G10, if only we just face agriculture alone. Then look at the petroleum industry where we are. Just this week alone, the government reported that 240 acts of crude oil theft. And if you listen to David Cameron briefing the Queen in 2015, he said that if half of the money that has been taken out of Nigeria and brought to Europe was taken from the UK, the UK will cease to exist. That was the British Prime Minister saying that. So when it comes to human talent, the country is not making sufficient investment in human talent. And if you look at the infrastructure that you need to succeed, everyone knows in this modern world that to succeed, you need stable electricity. It's no longer a slogan to provide electricity. It's just basic. It's part of the ecosystem now for modern development that you must have reliable, uninterrupted, stable electricity. A country that hasn't got that is not starting anywhere. Nigeria is not able to meet more than 5% of electricity needs. That in itself tells you something. And in that sector, everything you need to do to succeed, we have hydro, we have gas or thermal, we have more sunshine than anybody else. So all these sources for electrification is there. Now, if you look in terms of broadband coverage is weak, and modern industry is built around bandwidth. You must be able to have good internet penetration across the country. If you look at road networks, nobody should be dying on roads now, except you are careless or some freak of nature happens to you. You should not be taking for granted that if you travel regularly on roads, you are surely going to be involved in an accident because of the nature of the road. So we need to do something about that. We have not built up to 2,000 kilometers of rails since independence. We are still using the traditional rail line built by the British for the narrow purpose of taking raw materials from particular spots to Lagos. Recently, we built a new standard gauge from Lagos to Ibadan and from Abuja to Kaduna. So Abuja to Kaduna is the only new one, but the rest were standardization of the narrow gauge that used to be there. So there's no investment in that. And we haven't built a port, except Lekki Port, which was built recently. We have not built a port in 40 years. We are still using the legacy ports that we had. We have 4 refineries, 2 in Port Harcourt, 1 in Warri, 1 in Kaduna. None of them is producing 1 liter of petrol. For a country that is an exporter of crude oil, you would expect that if you have 4 refineries, at least they should be working. You should not be importing what you're supposed to produce. So our agricultural output has declined. So those are the things which made me to realize, okay, well, how do I solve the problem? I spent time trying to assist presidents, the various presidents that were there, either when I'm outside or when I go into the country. But I realized that it would be a tragedy if you ask Messi not to play, but to be a coach. And he has to tell you how to play the ball. Or you tell Ronaldo not to play, but to be a coach. You know, he's in his prime, he might as well just go and play on the field. So it can inspire you while he's on the field, but to just sit down on the sidelines and be pointing to people and say, go and score, you have to kick the ball like this, it's not efficient. So I thought to myself, okay, what I need to do is to suspend my private activities and go and provide leadership in the country. I also noticed that there's a particular age during which it is quite optimal for you to be in leadership. I don't think it's efficient for you to be in leadership when you are past your 60s. Because to serve efficiently, you need a lot of energy. You need to serve when you are in your prime. You need to be, I mean, with due respect, there are some countries that have very advanced, they have leaders that are advanced in age, but they can get away with it if they build systems, support systems, and their institutions are quite robust and old. But if you're dealing with a developing country like Nigeria, you need energy. You need an energetic leader, not a leader who spends most of his time recuperating in hospitals like our leaders have been doing. So you need energetic people. And the time is coming, if my life is preserved, when I will be too old to be president too. So it's a natural thing for human beings. So you have to do the right thing. So you cannot now say you just discover your talent in boxing in your 50s. I think you're too late. You should have developed that in your teenage years and your early 20s. So I put all of that into consideration, and I focus on two major problems of Nigeria: poverty and insecurity. Because I'm a social democrat, I realize that the way to development passes through the people. And you have to develop the intellect and the muscle for your people if you are going to be able to deal with poverty. People have to be able to become net producers. The average citizen in your country must be able to produce more than they consume if you're ever going to go into development, if you're ever going to defeat poverty sustainably. And until you defeat poverty, you cannot guarantee security. So you can maintain law and order for a while, but you don't have security until people are free from poverty. So I focus on those things, and to make people come out of poverty, you have to deal with what makes them poor. When whether in economics or in social sciences or in general commentary, how do you identify a poor person? The hallmarks are there. One, a poor person may have problems maintaining proper nutrition, good nutrition, access to nutrition for them and their family members. A poor person will invariably live in poor housing. So it's very rare to say someone is poor and they're living in a very good house. It's not likely. So they live in poor housing. The poor tend to have weak or no access to healthcare. So you know that diseases, communicable diseases, diseases having to do with poor hygiene and all of that, more likely to be found in the poor. Then you find out the poor tend to have less access to gainful employment. Very rarely you will find somebody who is poor if they are well paid and they have gainful employment. The poverty will go away. It is clear. And then poor people tend to have poor access to education, because you can educate yourself out of poverty. So however poor you are, or whatever your circumstances are, if you have access to education and you can become a doctor, an engineer, a teacher, a producer, you are on your way out of poverty. And the poor also tend to have less guarantees of legal protection. They tend to have less ability to preserve their own dignity, to enforce their rights within community, to have a say. So I thought that my program to deal with poverty in Nigeria would be to tackle those signposts of poverty, to make sure that whatever your circumstances and the situation you find yourself in Nigeria, you will have access to good nutrition. Because there was a time for 99% of the existence of the various communities in Nigeria, there was never food poverty. Before westernization, you will not find a hungry man anywhere in Nigeria. It was impossible. The people did not know what hunger meant, because there was always abundance of production, abundance of diet. And modern science and modern medicine has shown to us that the nutrition which our ancestors used to have was better than the nutrition we're having now. They understood the environment very well. And if you look at the pictures that history has preserved of people being taken into slavery, people being encountered by Western explorers when they come to Africa, Africa used to be bigger, stronger, and sturdier than we are now. So whereas the rest of the world is gaining in height, in weight, and Africa, we are going the opposite way, especially Nigeria. We used to be heftier, stronger, and sturdier than this. So, and that historical context makes us understand that if it was possible, with less technology, with less mechanization, for our ancestors to feed millions of people successfully, why is it now that the stock photo for poverty, stock photo for hunger, is an African face? It's just not fair to our history, and it's unnecessary, because the soil is still as rich as before, and technology is now even further advanced for us to be able to feed our people, and we understand dietary medicine or dietary science better now than before. So then housing, we're mainly in the tropics. We hardly have snow or any extreme weather condition. So in Nigeria, you could actually have housing with the flimsiest or flimsiest of materials. So why is it that we're not building housing? And there used to be a governor in Lagos, Lateef Kayode, who was governor of Lagos for only 4 months and 4 years and 3 months. He doubled the housing stock in Lagos. And up to now, if you go to Lagos and say, I want to go to Jakande Estate, they will ask, which one? Because in every district, there has Jakande Estate everywhere. And it is possible. Why is it that people are having housing problems, crowded cities and all of that? So I thought I would deal with that decisively. And education was a right in Nigeria, but the government is trying to turn it to a privilege. But it was a right. Traditionally, I started the interview letting you know that when you are born in our community, even before you start formal education, your family owes you that duty to impart in you whatever craft, skill, or knowledge that is in that family. So right from time, you will not find any person being asked to pay money to be educated in Nigeria, even before Western education came. If you come from a family of drummers, drum makers, metallurgy workers, metal workers, basket weavers, fishermen, whatever family you came from, you are trained as a right to have that skill. And if you want to go outside your family to have a skill, that's where they apprentice you to the other profession you want to go into, and it's your right. So, and when Nigeria started, the first government in Nigeria declared free education. That's why we produced so many there was rapid development of Nigerians in various fields. And they went to various universities in the world and became the best of the best. So that investment needs to be made as the population is rising, to see that everyone has access to education, quality education, And I think those are the things that I thought we should do. And if you invest massively in infrastructure, there is no difference between the dark ages and now, other than infrastructure. So any country can return to the dark ages if they don't have infrastructure. So if you go to Europe, you switch off electricity, you switch off the internet, you remove the train lines, and you shut down the airport, and you block the roads. Is Europe not back to the Stone Age? Europe is back to the Dark Ages. You do that. If you do that in North America, you do that in China, anywhere. If you do that in Dubai, they're back to 500 years ago. So that is the picture of Africa. By the government not investing in infrastructure, not investing in electricity, not investing in road networks, in modern transportation, they are leaving their people having a calendar, which is 2023, but an existence, which is 1003. So you are 1,000 years behind. Even worse, because in those days, even without infrastructure, the society was organized in a way in which they could still be efficient. But now, people are mentally trained to rely on infrastructure that does not exist. So those are the reasons why I thought we should do that. And healthcare is essential because childhood diseases can actually be dealt with immunization. So when you start to do the immunization on time, I put them on good diet, right from the time the baby is in the womb. If you do good maternal care for the mother, a healthy mother would most likely produce a healthy baby. And you pick up the baby from there, and you give them good nutrition, you give them proper immunization against diphtheria, against all these other fevers, against hepatitis, and so many other diseases that children contact in childhood. And you give them good food, and they live in well-ventilated houses with good water supply, and all of that. Do you know that in the 60s, Lagos, Nigeria, has the best quality water in the Commonwealth? Better than London, better than Sydney, Australia, better than Ottawa in Canada, better than all the other English-speaking, even in New Zealand, Auckland, and all those places. Lagos had the best water supply. So if you could run a city in the 60s that had the best quality water supply in the English-speaking world, why are you not able to keep it up now? And do you know that in the 60s and 70s, the king of Saudi Arabia used to do his medical check in Nigeria? In fact, he used to come at the time, one of them came to University College Hospital in Ibadan to have a heart bypass. So you see that Nigeria, that used to be the place you will go for good medical care, is now a place where we're having challenges giving medical care to our people, and many of our doctors are having to go overseas. Why did they go overseas? Because the quality of training for doctors in Nigeria is very high. That's why Canada, US, UK admit you without examination. The new regulation in the US now, you can admit a Nigerian doctor without examination. I also gave you an illustration of how I became a lawyer in America. So the quality of education, it gives you the best of the people. Pharmacy, agronomy, whichever field you find Nigerians. So why is it, therefore, that you will not make major investment so that the next generation can be better than the one before? So those are the reasons that took me into politics, and to manage the diversity of the country, to realize that our diversity is a legacy of how we came from the past. But that diversity does not stop us from traveling together to the future. So the diversity is okay. It just shows you the legacy of your different origins and the different things that you bring to the table. But where you are going is one destination. So to kind of give that leadership so that the debate around diversity does not suck up all the oxygen in the room, because there are common problems that you find yourself. So if you are on a flight from Philadelphia to Lisbon, you will find Chinese people there, Japanese people there, Portuguese passengers, other Europeans, Africans, Americans. So as you see their faces, you will know that these people, they will dress differently, they will speak different languages, and they will have different family structure. You will see the African with their 5 children dragging their luggage. You will see the Japanese with only 1 child alone. You will see the Americans, you will see. But once you are on that plane, you are all passengers. And the rules of aviation apply to all of you, irrespective of your cultural diversity and all of that. So when they say, strap on your seatbelt, all of you have to do it. You cannot say, hey, you Japs, strap on your seatbelt. Africans, you can wait. No. So you are all now in the aviation experiment of trying to fly from one place to the other. You have only one destination, which is Lisbon, that you are all flying to. That's how development is. You come with different background, but once you are in that developmental system, you are one. You're one. You're just going to the same direction. And that is what leadership will do for Nigeria, or will do for any country. And why I'm particularly interested in Nigerian leadership is that when you get Nigerian leadership right, you are helping the world, because you're getting African leadership right. Because every region is driven by the energy of the center of gravity. And if you look at the EU today, with due respect to all other European countries, EU today is a synergy of the core of Germany and France. Because this used to be the cat and mouse in the loggerheads. Every world war has involved the two of them having some disagreement. And once they came together into the steel community, the European steel community, the two of them agreed to be there. And then they expanded it, and the rest of Europeans rally around them. Because if they were at war, Europeans would have to take sides, to be on the German side or on the French side. So the two of them coming together has made others to come together and help that. In Africa, Nigeria is that core. So either Nigeria will combine with South Africa and Egypt and drive a continental project towards development. So it is important for Nigeria to have a good leadership. And once you have that, you will see that if of those who are poor are in Africa, then the office that I run for is the solution to that. If majority of diseases are in Africa, the WHO, the World Health Organization, when they're talking about communities that are lagging behind, still having yellow fever, not up to date in dealing with meningitis, not up to date in this and that, still having river blindness. But it's because there's no leadership in Nigeria. Because Nigeria is so wealthy that most of the development aid you are sending to Africa is unnecessary. Because Nigeria spends 15% of its surplus in trying to assist neighboring countries. You don't need to go there. So then the world will be a better place. The wars that are still in Africa and all the instability is because there's no core leadership there. And it's my appeal to Africans to understand that, especially Nigerians, and to get our act together. It's also an appeal to the international community. Don't be desperate to retain Africa as your development clientele forever. Support measures and leaders that can take Africa off the hook, so that the rest of the world is also facing challenges now. Europe is now back to facing some of its own challenges. America is struggling with its own challenges, and Asia hasn't come out of the woods yet. So you need, therefore, to have stability in Africa, to let Africa be able to solve basic problems. And then you can still partner. There's always room to partner, but you must let people have the ability to attend to their basic needs as human beings. So those are the things that brought me into politics. And we started interacting and changing the language and letting people focus on these issues. So once Africa is free from poverty and is free from insecurity, automatically have a better world. And it's going to raise world's GDP by at least 15 points. You could see how much China and India have contributed to world GDP. So imagine Africa making equivalent contribution. It will lift everyone up in the world. Everyone in America today is finding it easier to afford live amenities and gadgets that used to be expensive in the past. And that's because the cost of production has been cut down by assessing quality labor, available labor in China, India, and some periphery of Asia. So once you do the same in Africa, and given the teachability of Africans, given the creativity of Africans, given the energy level, given the youthful population, where are you going to get your youths in the future? The youths that are going to drive the development of Japan, drive the development of Europe, drive the development of North America are in Africa. Because that's where you have majority, over 70% of people being below 20. So you want to make sure that you recognize that they could potentially be a problem to the world. They could be sneaking across the desert and crossing the Mediterranean Sea to come to Europe. But they could actually be at home producing quality for you. So it is a model which sinks into my experience as an international investment lawyer. I realized that nobody can escape globalization. Even in America here, I remind my people here that, look, closing your border and being very strong on immigration control, that people should not come and steal your jobs, does not save you from your jobs going to meet them in their country. So either way, we have to have an international system that allows global value chain to be efficient. Because you either say, well, we're closing our border because we don't want you to come and steal our jobs. But that system can be so efficient that your jobs will migrate to go and meet them, wherever they are. But when your jobs go to meet them, the goods are coming back to you, better and cheaper. So I think that if Africa is progressively making progress, solving problems, and become a net contributor to the global commerce, everyone's human development index will rise globally. After all, many of the things you find in Europe today were colonial gains from going to Africa and trading with Africa. So, and Africa has not given out more than 1% of what is in her belly. So why don't we now find a more cooperative way where democracies are trading with democracies. Democracies are partnering with democracies. So that's why I thought I should go to Nigeria and give leadership. That is what I'm on about now.
That's a fantastic vision. So I know that we passed the 2 hours, so I'll try to do this, and probably we'll do a second round afterwards. But there's one thing I want to ask, and I know that is very dear to you. So you mentioned education. So the average life or age of a Nigerian is 18 point something years. So it's a very young population. Like we mentioned, in 2050, it will be the 4th population in the world. And like you mentioned, China leapfrog in 10 years to become the world leading economy. India is partly doing the same, from an extreme poverty to right now solving most of the problems. But in one end, Nigeria is already a global powerhouse. So it's the largest economy in Africa. At the moment, from GDP, is around the 27, something like that, but it's still fast growing. So how do you see this part, like you mentioned, education, development, and all the areas of your agenda, and as well that are completely super important to put in practice, but as well, especially with the young population, because that's the biggest challenge that we have for humanity, not just for Nigeria, but for the world. And bear in mind that most of the young population is actually in Africa, and Nigeria is one of those countries. How do you tackle this, especially with the challenge that comes from, of course, advanced technologies, social media, and all these things that create, in one end, fantastic and magnificent tools, but in one end, very disruptive and destructive tools, and sometimes as well, very division tools?
You see, the way to look at it first, let's start from the demographics. You know, we started talking about population from the time of the economist, Thomas Malthus, who has the Malthusian theory that the world could become overpopulated. So from that time, there's a negative spin to population. When you hear, oh, the world is 7 billion, then Africa is this figure, and Nigeria is going to become the 4th largest. There are 2 ways to put a population: on the y-axis and on the x-axis. You can look at population quantitatively or qualitatively. So when you hear that Nigeria is going to be 400 million people, that number should not frighten you. Why? Because if you're going to have 50 million new engineers who are good in science, technology, engineering, and maths, if you're going to have 25 million more people who are doing in bios, engineering sciences, if you're going to have 15 more million in medical care, medicine, pharmacy, nursing, if you're going to have 80 million more teachers, you see that the world is becoming a better place. Because when I was growing up in Nigeria, there was a time various state governments came up with massive drive towards education. And we ran out of teachers. And teachers came from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. Up to the time, right from secondary school, and up to the time when I left university, I still had Indian teachers in the university teaching me. It was after we had devaluation of currency, and it wasn't worth it for many of them. And then the military government came and said, with foreign teachers, the contracts will not be renewed. But what I'm bringing to you is that even though I grew up in Nigeria, my school in Nigeria, I was a beneficiary of Sri Lankan teachers, beneficiary of Indian teachers, Pakistani teachers, French teachers, British teachers, and Nigerian teachers. So it shows to you that it is possible, and it's happening already, whereby Africa, Nigeria in particular, but also the rest of Africa, would provide the needed social engineering manpower for the rest of the world. So, and this disruptive technology is disruptive only to established systems. For Africa that is just coming up, because we don't have much in terms of the old industrial base. What we call disruptive technology is actually our own technology. It's what we know. So for my mother, the internet is disruptive. But for my children, internet is their world. So even on the day they were born, their mother posted them on the internet, a newborn baby. So they are already introduced from the womb into technology. They wake up in the morning, their first toys are telephones and not the rest of it. So Nigeria, the plan is to give the cutting edge of global education to the people. Right now, coding is what Nigerian youth are highly interested in. Of course, there's an element I need to introduce to it, is that the world is a cycle, and we are recycling. For example, what we call coding, binary mathematics, was practiced in Egypt 6,000 years ago, more. So if you check all the papyrus paper that we are going to recover, you will see that binary mathematics was how the Egyptian accountants and surveyors and farmers, managers used to compute their grains, produce, and measurement of land and everything. So humanity is just recycling knowledge. So just so we don't get too frightened when we see technology, it's based on a rich tradition of how our human brain is capable of interpreting the world. So we should not get too excited about it. It just, we're making new applications of the same knowledge. Mathematics is the same as before. Now, what we want to do in Africa, and in particular in Nigeria, is to make sure that when you have a child pass through school, by the time they are 18, 19, going to college, they are already equipped to work with the modern tools in the world. And science, technology, engineering, and math play a major role in that. And then to go understand bioengineering as well, so that they can be strong with the biological sciences and help the world, because the world, as well, rising in population, we need to get more out of the earth per square meter without causing as much damage to the earth per square meter. So you need people who are going to be the new custodians of the earth, who can do hydroponic agriculture in a small space and not be going through polluting whole streams and all of that. You need hydrographers and hydrologists. You need environmental scientists whose job is to make sure they preserve the environment, restore the ozone layer for us, raise the quality of air across, and all of that. So it is the application to which we use these young Africans that's going to determine their contribution to the world, so that they are not like, they're not producing 400 million pollutants. No, you are producing 400 million caterers to the earth. They are producing people who are into forestry. Like in my community, I've been getting the young people to plant trees. So if you have 400 million Nigerians who spend a lifetime planting 1 tree a month, they can plant 12 trees a year. And 400 million of them doing that, you consider that we can restore the world. So I think that is the challenge, is just to make people to be knowledgeable about the world, get away from people living a life of superstition, a life of ignorance, a life of prejudice. So understanding the world and being stewards of the environment, and being producers of sustainable products that can be consumed across borders. So you would not know the value of the 18-year-old in Nigeria now until when he lands in Europe as a medical doctor, until when he lands in Europe as a chiropractor, until he lands in Europe as a mental health counselor, until he lands Europe as a person who is helping you to do the remediation of the environment. And that's how we tend to prepare our people so that we become more useful to our environment. And more importantly, Nigerians, whether you educate them or not, will self-educate. And you want to make sure that people don't self-educate in the wrong ethics. For example, if you don't get young people into the value chain of global finance and get them to be able to use fintech, you will see that they will self-educate and become hackers. Whereas if you had properly educated them and integrated them, they will be programmers and all of that. But you leave them out, they'll become hackers. And you find so many of them being real. It's only after they've got into trouble that you now recognize their talent, and then you punish them, and then later you start to integrate them. Why don't you integrate them at the beginning? Because no force in the world, no conspiracy in the world, no neglect in the world can stop a Nigerian from achieving what he wants to achieve. So that's what the world needs to know. You can build electric fences all around your countries. If the Nigerian person wants to get there, he's going to get there anyway. You can build firewall around your infrastructure. If the Nigerian person wants to crack into it, he's going to crack into it anyway. So why don't we have a system whereby we catch them young, get them to be part of the positive contribution value chain, and they have loyalty to the system. They have a feeling of using their creativity to try to validate what the system wants to do than using it to attack it. So I think that is what I want us to understand. If you look at talent in music, in sports, and all of this, we are very lucky to have young people who are available to use their talent. So what we need is to create a government that's more like a parent. Because what is happening in Africa as these young people are growing, it's like having a large population of people growing without mentorship, without parenthood. And you expect them to turn out the way you expect, or the way that it pleases you. It doesn't work that way. We need to make massive investment in their orientation, massive investment in skilling and tooling them, massive investment in getting them to be committed. And once you get young people into a system and they spend 20 years working in that system, they become adults and they become stakeholders, because they will have homes, they will have children who they also want to train, they will have seniority because they've invested their intellectual equity into the system. So they also they want to preserve it. Because if you work in a system for 20 years, you don't want it to collapse, because you want to rely on it in your old age. You want it to be something that can be there for you and your children. But to leave people, to let people lose without the system caring for them, and they now manage to take care of themselves, manage to cross the desert and come to Europe, manage to teach themselves coding, they're going to use it to attack the system. It's obvious. And you see a lot of, now you now start to stigmatize, you now start to complain. But in reality, the best thing to have done, the best thing to do now, is to catch young people young, discover their talents, and get them into the formal institutions. And then you can now hone on the talent to meet the national objective. And in Nigeria, Chapter 2 of our Constitution has the most comprehensive of all social engineering methodology in the world. Nigeria has the best constitution in the world when it comes to dealing with fundamental objectives and directive principle of state policy. I think Nigeria and India are the two countries that I know that have that. That is to say, you don't come into public space, you don't come to public office with your idiosyncratic experiments only. You come to fulfill the national objective. And the fundamental objective of Nigeria is to abolish poverty, abolish insecurity, abolish inequality, abolish discrimination, and to not have the commanding heights of the economy concentrated in the hand of a few people, and not to have any discrimination against anybody according to the circumstances of their birth, and to allow every citizen to have a full potential and to participate in the governance of their country. Nigeria has the right not only to vote and be voted for, you have the right to participate in the economy of your country. So this, and then we have national ethics of what the country, Nigeria is one of the few countries in the world that the constitution does not only guarantee right to the citizens, the constitution also imposes duty on the citizens. So just like the citizen can take the government to court for violating his right, so also does the state have responsibility, has his own expectation of the citizen. The citizen has a duty also under the Constitution. So with that, an education is a right under the Constitution. So with that, there is no excuse for any leader to say, I'm at a loss as to how to drive my politics. I'm at a loss as to how to serve my people. I'm at a loss as to the next step in our developmental journey. All of that is in the Constitution. So that is what we need to focus on. And I commend to you to study that. And I believe that even many countries are having debates. There are so much debates that I see now in America. When I'm here and I study American politics, I see that if only they could pick chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution, it might answer some of these things for even the Americans, because it's a good document to study, and you will see that everyone knows their place in the country. It's like an orchestra. Nigeria's constitution is setting up society like an orchestra. So the flutist knows that he needs to play his flute when it is required, and the song sheet is in front of everybody, and the government is just the conductor. The government's role is to indicate to you when it's your turn to do your beats. So what is happening in Nigeria now is that the song sheet is put in the shelf. The conductor is turning his back to the orchestra. It's not, you can't see what he's doing. And the guy who's supposed to play the flute is actually holding the trumpet. The guy who's going to play the piano is actually holding the drum. So everybody is just doing opposite of what they need to do. So my job is to come and put the orchestra in place and put the song sheet in front of everyone and then conduct the orchestra. And I think that you will have very good music coming out of Nigeria in terms of development, in terms of security, in terms of, you just discovered that Nigeria has kicked poverty in the teeth. Poverty is gone. And it becomes a prosperous country, and you can all go there and say, oh. So I look forward to a time when a young Danish boy will marry a French girl, and they will say, well, I'm going to Nigeria for my honeymoon. It's so common because the world feels so safe. And you would be using technology, you'll be using services that will have made in Nigeria on them, and you'll feel comfortable. So I think we have a lot to contribute to the world.
Well, it's amazing, your vision, and I believe that it's possible to do it. I want to thank you for your time. There's much more questions I have, but for today, I think let's do this round. I want to touch more probably in the second round about the nitty-gritty, how we can take it forward. I know there's a lot of wisdom in the way you approach things, and I would like to continue this series. So, Adewole, I would like to thank you for this fantastic interaction, and as well for showing us your vision, both about the culture of Nigeria, Africa, but as well your vision for the country, and as well how we can actually look at understanding better such a powerful country, and especially as yours, and how we can actually bring this energy to the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dinis. My regards to your team. I'm most grateful for this interview.